And then finally, grazing, just various eating over time, intermittent eating at various locations. And another one that's actually not on here that can sometimes affect people is night eating. So when, we've already had our dinner, getting ready for bed, and either due to, some sort of either boredom or whatever it may be, we turn to food to kind of occupy our time or to satisfy some emotional need. So there are two primary causes of emotional eating, and both of them are, well, we'll start with, deprivation. Deprivation stems from this culture that we have in our society where of dieting, and starvation or self-imposed dieting really does create a craving for the very food that we're trying to resist. And so it has basically these unintended consequences that a lot of times we're trying to fight against. And when we try to restrict ourselves from eating, so for example, if we tell ourselves, no, I don't want to, I can't have that cookie, then inevitably what's going to happen is we're going to want that cookie even more. And when we try to restrict ourselves from having that, what ends up happening a lot of times is that we end up consuming more than what we need, because we're giving in and rebelling to this temptation that we have. And although we're trying to maintain some control over our food intake when we're dieting, the issue is that what inadvertently happens is we become very preoccupied with food. Food is on our mind 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and we're constantly thinking about how we can control our intake, what we need to eat, when we need to eat, how we need to eat, and so when food is on our mind constantly like that, then it coupled with the restrictive sort of eating behavior, it can really lead to some periods where we overeat or have some binge eating. And I'm going to skip over affective regulation real quick just so I can go over this diet-binge cycle. Really what creates this cycle of dieting and binging is, we have a cultural body idea that is really, a lot of times very kind of unrealistic and unattainable for a lot of people, which is, modeled by actresses and different, people in our society. And when we don't match that body ideal, a lot of times that leads to a lot of negative body thoughts, and subsequently that leads to dieting behavior, which leads to overeating. And when we do overeat, because essentially when we're restricted in that way, that's a very hard thing to maintain for an indefinite period of time. And what ends up happening is that we come off of our diet and fall back into our same sort of eating routine. That can lead to some really negative emotions: guilt, shame, depression, anxiety. And what do we do when we have those emotions? If eating is what we do to cope with our emotions, we tend to overeat to escape that. And so this cycle of, this myth that dieting is an effective way to lose weight is actually has been, really maladaptive. And the NIH recently did a study that showed that 95 to 98% of people who go on a diet actually end up reverting back to their old eating behaviors and gain as much plus more weight than they initially lost. So that's a pretty high percentage, 95 to 98%. So obviously there's something wrong with how we're trying to sort of manage our weight in our society. Another reason why people eat is for affect regulation. So for other reasons outside of negative emotions that might come from deprivation, we might feel stressed at work. We might feel anxious about something going on in our lives. We might feel happy. We can also eat for neutral emotions like boredom. And so if eating is our go-to sort of method for coping with our emotions, it's essentially the definition of emotional eating. And we live in a society where food is very abundant. Everywhere we turn, there's food. There's food at work, there's food, at home, there's food at the grocery store. And so it becomes a very easy sort of thing to turn to for comfort and support. So the first step to really understanding why, because for each person, the reason why we eat it varies. And even for emotional eating, the specific emotion that may trigger us to want to eat varies from person to person. And so what may cause one individual, so boredom may cause one individual to want to eat or overeat, whereas anger in that same individual may cause a person to not want to eat or lose their appetite. And so this emotional eating scale was developed by Abramson, and it has specific items for different types of emotions to give you a sense of what are the specific triggers for you. And so for depression, a couple of items are when I'm feeling down or blue, a little snack will lift my mood. Anxiety and stress, when I'm pressured at work or under a deadline, I have the urge to snack. For anger, sometimes when people irritate me, I want to get something to eat. For boredom, I look forward to eating when I'm bored, or I eat more than usual when there's nothing to do. For loneliness, being alone increases my appetite. I'm less likely to eat when other people around me is when I'm by myself. And for happiness, I celebrate with food when I'm in a good mood. If I'm feeling really good, I don't worry about my diet. And so understanding this why you eat, particularly if it's for emotional reasons, really can give us some sense of awareness about our eating cycle. And in order to really be successful in changing our eating behaviors, we really do have to gain more awareness about our eating habits and the things that trigger us to want to eat. And this is something that is deceptively simple because, sounds like, okay, well, duh, of course, you just need to know what triggers you. But eating is such an unconscious behavior a lot of times when it happens that we're not in tune with what is triggering us to eat. We're not in tune with whether or not an emotional response is really causing us to want to turn to food for comfort. And so really focusing in on these questions, and this was actually developed by a lady named Michelle May, who's a family physician, who developed this because of her own issues with yo-yo dieting and emotional eating. And so the first question is, why do I eat? And this is very central to ultimately changing behavior, understanding the why. And because the why has a direct impact on what we eat. So if you're eating for emotional reasons, when are you likely to want to eat?
Mr. Ward, Mr. Jimmy Ward, please tell hospital operator. Mr. Ward, Mr. Jimmy Ward.
So whenever you're feeling any sort of, emotion that might trigger that. And what are you likely to eat if you're eating if you're eating for emotional reasons and not because you're actually physically hungry, what are you likely to turn to?
Sweets and
carbs.
Your comfort foods.
Your comfort foods, which tend to not necessarily be the healthiest foods. Yeah, and actually are predominantly carbohydrates. So candy, chocolate, potato chips, whatever it may be. And how do you typically eat when you're eating to kind of satisfy an emotional need? Mindless. And what does that mean?
You don't pay attention to how much of what they're doing, where I'm another. Just keep on doing it.
Exactly.
Convenience foods, like
Convenience foods,
quick
yeah.
stuff you can cook, you just
Turn to whatever's available. Yeah. So you tend to eat mindlessly for convenience. Sometimes people eat secretly. And a lot of times, people will eat very quickly because it allows, if you're eating to satisfy an emotional need, the quicker you eat, the more you eat, the better you feel like you think you're going to feel. And so, and one of the, and so you pointed out you're eating mindlessly and you're not really paying attention to how much you're eating. So typically, we tend to eat until, the food that we have in front of us is gone, or until we feel completely stuffed or, engorged that we can't eat anymore. And so we end up investing our energy in, our food is not used to invigorate us. It's not used to kind of give us fuel to, do things that we need to do in life. A lot of times we end up feeling sluggish we end up feeling really tired, and a lot of times that can cause us that can lead to a lot of negative self-talk. Oh, well, here I go, I'm eating all of this food, I'm gaining this weight and whatnot. And so it leads to this kind of vicious cycle of that really feeds into one another. And so understanding the why is really important, because a lot of times, when we're doing things mindlessly, we're not really consciously aware of why we're doing it. And so by pausing and taking a step back and just stopping and really thinking and having some awareness as to, okay, well, whenever I choose to eat something, that is a choice I'm making. Why am I making that choice? And being attuned to what's going on inside of your body, what's happening inside of you. Are you physically hungry, or are you doing this for another reason? If it's for another reason, what is that reason? And so having this awareness really is an instrumental force in helping to instill change. Now, if we change this up a little bit and we talk about, let's just say if you're dieting, why do you eat when you're dieting? Like, what triggers you to want to eat? Hunger. Well, deprivation, yeah. And usually there are rules. There are certain rules that kind of clue you into why you're supposed to be eating. Lunchtime, yeah. And your when you eat is really driven by these rules. There are several of them that have kind of been proposed. Eat every 3 to 4 hours. No eating after 7 p.m. What you eat is also driven by these rules. How you eat, it tends to be very rigid and restrictive, and how much you eat is also, very rigid and restrictive, and a lot of times people invest their energy in thinking about, the diet and exercising, and dieting sometimes can turn exercising into a punitive or punishing behavior, something you do to kind of make up for the food that you've eaten or something that you've done. And so if you think about this, how sustainable is that? Is that something that you can do for the rest of your life? Usually, a person is likely to just say, okay, I'm just going to go off of this temporarily or cheat here and there, and that leads to, again, a lot of negative self-talk, which makes us more prone to emotional eating. And so this mindful eating cycle, I think, is very, very important in being able to, in the first step in terms of changing our behaviors. And so you mentioned the mindless eating, which I think is something that a lot of us, I think all of us have done at some point in time. We have this perception in our society that multitasking is something that is a skill or something to be valued, and the reality is that our brain can only fully focus on one task at a time. And so if we're eating and we're working at the same time and our mind is focused on our job, then we're not really fully attuned to what we're doing while we're eating, and we just go on autopilot. When we're on autopilot, we're not really paying attention to our physical cues or the things that are happening inside of our body that clue us into when we've had enough or when we're full. And so this is something that happens a lot of times when we eat in our society, because a lot of times we're either talking with friends or socializing, working, driving. If you think about how you ate breakfast today, a lot of times people are feeling rushed and trying to eat breakfast while they're doing several other things at the same time. And so the first step in really trying to change some of these eating behaviors that may be triggered by emotions is being a little bit more mindful about eating, which really involves paying attention to the experience of eating and drinking both inside and outside the body. So part of what that entails is slowing down when you're eating. When you take a bite, really, a lot of us can sometimes eat a meal and be done with the meal and not really have enjoyed or tasted or savored, what we ate, and that's due to mindless eating. And so if we can slow down and really pay attention to the process of eating, which means putting down our fork in between bites, really taking time to chew and think about, the flavors and things of that nature that we're eating, that kind of slows down the eating process and allows us to actually be fully aware of that experience, which can help us understand more and learn about what our body is telling us about hunger and satisfaction. And so, this can be a really instrumental tool in helping with overeating, because when you're more aware of what your body's telling you, the more likely you are to listen to your body when it says it's full. Now, one of the things that makes eating or overeating very easy in our society is portion sizes. The portion sizes for meals that we eat or that are served at restaurants have increased substantially over time. A typical serving of French fries at McDonald's has tripled in calories from the time the franchise opened up until now. An average supersized value menu has between 1,500 to 2,000 calories, which is what most people need in one day. And so, if we're not in tune with the process of eating, we're fully aware of what we're eating, and we're sort of mindlessly eating, and what ends up happening a lot of times is we eat until our plate is empty or until there's nothing left to eat. And what ends up happening is that if we're eating based on these portion sizes that are served nowadays, we tend to overeat and eat more than what we need. So something that can be helpful in becoming a little bit more mindful about eating is creating a hunger scale that ranges from 0 to 10, and with 0 being the most hungry and 10 being the least hungry. And so what this really, what this entails is every time you make a choice to eat, being conscious and deliberate about that choice that you're making, understanding why you're making that choice, and if that choice is for any other reason besides hunger, then recognizing that, okay, well, turning to food for this is only temporary comfort that's likely to lead to more negative emotions over time. And we'll talk in a little bit about how to deal with those emotions in a healthier way rather than not eating. But that awareness is the first step in understanding that. And so the second step is really understanding, okay, well, in my body, how hungry am I? What's going on for me? And part of what that entails is really recognizing the physical cues that clue you into when you are hungry, and when you're hungry at different levels of hunger. And so what does a 0 feel like when, on a scale from 0 to 10, with 0 being the most hungry, what does 0 feel like physically when you're extremely hungry?
Your stomach's growling.
Stomach's growling, okay.
You feel weak.
Feel weak. Yeah. Yeah, so, you have an actual physical response to that. It doesn't feel good. What does a 10 feel like when you're as full as you can imagine? Yeah, it feels pretty bad. Sometimes, it's hard to move. And so, understanding, what, and these are obviously both two extremes of the spectrum, and we'll go over a hunger scale in a moment, but pausing and just having awareness of where you are on a hunger scale can really be a beneficial tool to understanding, okay, well, is it time for me to eat, and also how much I should eat. And another thing that's important to recognize is that being in tune with this hunger scale is not just prior to eating, but also while you're eating and once you're done eating. Understanding, okay, well, and so you want to be checking in on a regular basis to understand where you are. And so, so this is a hunger scale, very small print, it's hard to read, but if you look here that if you really want to avoid getting into that 1 to 3 level, because when you're at that point, you're very, any of us would be prone to overeating because we feel so deprived, so depleted that we want to eat as much as we can, and it's very easy to eat more than what we need. It's best to strive to eat between that when you get to that 4 level, because at that point, you're feeling hungry, and food sounds good, but you have a little bit more self-control, and you're able to really make mindful decisions about what you want to eat. And ideally, you don't want to eat beyond the 7 level, because that's when you start getting into that feeling too full phase. And if you find yourself being at that 7 level, still wanting to eat, then that's a time to kind of take a step back and ask yourself, what is it that you really need or want at this point in time? Are you feeling bored? Are you feeling tired? Are you feeling sad? What is it that you're turning to at that point? And if it's anything other than physical hunger, it's really important to be honest with yourself, recognize that you're full, and understand that eating is not going to help you feel emotionally better at that point in time. Another thing that can be helpful with being a little bit more mindful about how you eat is keeping a mindful eating journal. And this is something that you can do when you're starting off, trying to sort of understand more about your eating habits. And this particular eating journal has the time, so you document what time you ate, exactly what you ate and drank. So, of course, the actual ounces and things of that nature. Then also the hunger scale, before and after eating. Where were you on that hunger scale? And what were you doing while you were eating? Were you fully aware of the process? Were you socializing? Were you working? Were you watching TV? Whatever it is, what were you doing? What was it that you were thinking while you were eating? And how were you feeling? And so having this eating journal can be helpful, because if you look back on it and say, okay, well, that was a meal where I feel like I overate, or I felt like I took in more than I needed, you can kind of look at, okay, well, what was going on for me? Was it something that I was doing? Was it something that I was thinking? Was it something that I was feeling? To kind of give you some insight on some of the habits, patterns, or triggers that might be leading to overeating, and some of the things that you can focus on changing. So some suggestions to try in order to kind of cope with, a tendency to want to, turn to eating for emotions is, and to also become more aware of physical cues of hunger, is looking at looking at specific environmental cues and triggers, and adjusting those triggers that might compel you to eat unhealthy foods, or eat too much, or eat both unhealthy and too much. And so one thing that can help is eating on smaller plates. That can help you limit portion sizes, making a conscious effort to set aside single-serve portions, ordering smaller portions at restaurants, and if they don't have the option for smaller portions, splitting up your food in half and setting half of it to the side, so that you have to make a conscious and deliberate effort to really check in once you finish half of your meal and say, okay, well, where am I in terms of my hunger level, and am I still hungry? My husband and I recently went to this event and got a free dinner voucher to a really nice restaurant. And when we got there, we found out that it was literally like a 5-course meal, but they were 2 bites per course. And so it was just a very, very small portion. I was like, oh my goodness, I'm starving. I need more than this. And at the end of the meal, even though I felt like, it looked like I hadn't eaten very much, I felt full. And I realized, wow, I'm probably overeating when I go to restaurants, because, by the time I'm finished with my meal, I oftentimes eat more than that. And so, really cutting your portions in half and setting it to the side, it forces you to stop, pause, and take a second to really figure out what's going on inside your body. Placing unhealthy foods out of sight, and planning meals and snacks ahead of time. So, we've talked a lot about ways to be more aware of the reasons why you're eating, and being more mindful about your eating, and really tuning in and making sure that you're eating for physical hunger cues rather than for any other reason. But let's just say if you are having, an emotional response to something, and that triggers you to want to eat something, it's really important to also take some time to think about, okay, well, what am I going to do when I have that emotional response if I'm not going to turn to food anymore? How am I going to cope with that? And one really effective coping strategy is figuring out how some sort of self-care. So let's just say if you're feeling down or depressed, or if you're feeling anxious, or whatever the emotion may be, what is soothing or pleasurable to each person obviously is unique to you and yourself. And taking some time out to kind of think about, okay, well, what's an alternate way that I'm going to use to cope with this emotion that comes up for me, rather than turning to food, and making a conscious and deliberate effort by recognizing that, okay, every time, I see food and make a choice to eat, what is the reason that I'm eating? Is it because I'm hungry? If it's not, then what can I do to deal with this emotion in a more effective and healthy manner? So some examples are, gardening, reading. For anxiety and stress, what can be particularly helpful is deep breathing, taking a bath, getting a massage, meditating, anything that's relaxing. And I want to point out also that this is not something that that just kind of comes to you at a whim. It really does take time to observe and to learn about one, how you eat and what the triggers are for eating, and alternate ways to figure out how you might deal with things other than physical cues, physical hunger cues, to cope with those emotions that come up. So, in conclusion, there are various reasons for eating. People often eat for reasons other than hunger, such as emotions. Self-observation is really required in order to change behaviors. So, after today's presentation, I would encourage all of you to go through that mindful eating cycle and really ask yourself some of those questions about, the why, and what you eat, how much you eat, how you eat, to really gain a better understanding of what some of those triggers are. And it's also important to point out that we're all born with the instinctive ability to know when and how much to eat. So, when we're babies, we react and cry when we're physically hungry. We stop eating when we feel full. But many of us have forgotten how to turn to those physical cues, because we've learned and unconsciously developed coping strategies for things such as emotions that involve eating. And so we eat for other reasons than hunger. So eating mindfully, like I said before, involves skills that are not gained overnight. When you look at what eating mindfully entails, like I said before, it is very deceptively simple, but it requires a lot of thought and insight, and it really truly is a lifestyle change. And so, it's something that, one, just involves gaining awareness first, and once you have that awareness, then you can work on making changes that can be sustainable. And it's important to recognize that, a lot of times people struggle with unconscious behaviors and habits that they've had for years, which, would involve eating for emotional reasons. But really trying to make an effort to be mindful allows you to wake up and be more aware of your actions. And through this awareness, you can really implement some positive change. Thank you for